For over 15 years, George R.R. Martin's progress on the Winds of Winter has barely moved. What started as hopeful updates over 100 pages written slowly turned into frustration, with Martin openly lashing at fans for only caring about one book. And somewhere along the way, the question changed from fans asking when the Winds of Winter would release to asking if it ever will. Before Game of Thrones ever aired back in 1996, George R.R. Martin released his first ever A Song of Ice and Fire novel, A Game of Thrones. At this point, the series had a small but fiercely dedicated audience, but nowhere near the cultural titan it would eventually become. The next two books, A Clash of Kings and A Storm of Swords, were released 2 years apart from each other. Then came A Feast for Crows, which took 5 years to release, and the fifth book, A Dance with Dragons, took 6, releasing conveniently alongside the debut of Game of Thrones Season 1, which concluded on June 3rd, 2012. The first-time viewers were thrilled, and the book readers were genuinely amazed. Amazed because this wasn't just good for an adaptation, it was genuinely good. Now, sure, there were a few purists grumbling in the corners of the internet, asking where's Jon Snow's inner dialogue? Where is his opinion on King Robert? What about his admiration for Daeron I? The stuff you can't just show in a live-action TV show. I mean, if it were something animated like Attack on Titan, an animated series where inner thoughts were common, then sure, that stuff would work. But even those die-hard fans, the ones who could recite the Targaryen family tree backwards, had to admit it. Season 1 worked. And then comes the next question, the one no one was prepared for. What happens when it gets bigger? Because Season 2 didn't just maintain quality, it doubled down on it. 96% on Rotten Tomatoes, great critical acclaim, and suddenly fans weren't just watching the show, they were online making a bunch of theories. Who is the Red Woman? Who the frick is Jon Snow's mother? The franchise, even in its early days, was becoming defined by tons of questions. But just when it felt like things couldn't possibly get bigger, Season 3 released and the show skyrockets. More viewers, and more importantly, more readers. The third season concludes on June 9th, and another 96% on Rotten Tomatoes. But let's be honest, critics weren't what made this season legendary, it was the Red Wedding, an episode that generated massive real-time reactions online.
There's a clip that's on the internet right now of fans reacting, YouTube video of fans reacting to what you call the Red Wedding, which was the most stunning thing many of us have seen in television, maybe ever, certainly in a long, long time. So let's take a look now.
You know what? That's why this is the best show of all time.
Martin had a hit HBO show. His books were climbing bestseller lists. Everything he had built since 1996 was finally paying off. And just when things started to get good, they got even better. On April 6, 2014, Season 4 premieres. The shocking, brutal death of Oberyn Martell. The horrifying push that sent Lysa Arryn for the Moon Door. And the moment that united the entire internet, Joffrey's poisoning. Many fans assumed that the show's massive success would light a fire under Martin. That the momentum and the cultural dominance would drive him to finish the Winds of Winter faster. But when Season 5 premiered on April 12, 2015, something felt different. Now, to be clear, many fans actually liked this season, but something felt off compared to the books. Season 5 adapts books 4 and 5, A Feast for Crows and A Dance with Dragons, stories that focus heavily on the aftermath. It's much slower compared to its previous season, and to its credit, it still delivered. Heart Home, arguably one of the greatest episodes in the entire show, reminded everyone exactly why they fell in love with the show in the first place. So at this point, fans weren't furious yet, until the 6th season debuted. Now, here's the tricky part. The general consensus around Season 6 is actually pretty positive. In fact, many fans rank it as one of the show's best, especially because of how they handled Jon Snow's reveal and of course the Battle of the Bastards. But underneath that spectacle, something felt off. And to understand why, we have to rewind to 2012. In October 2012, Martin announces that he has written around 400 pages of The Winds of Winter. He says he's looking forward to publishing it in 2014. It was 2016 at the time. 2 years past the promised window and Season 6 is airing. And there's still no 6th book. As much as casual viewers enjoyed Season 6, and to be fair, so did most book fans, but the biggest issue for those same book fans was seeing through the holes in the 6th season. And one absence in particular stood out the most, young Griff. Now, if you've only seen the show, you're probably asking, wait, who's that? And I gotta say, fair question. In the books, young Griff is a secret Targaryen prince who was completely cut off from the show, and his storyline might be the single biggest missing missing piece between the books and the TV show. In the books, young Griff presents himself as Aegon VI Targaryen. Many book fans call him Fagon, like F for fake, and the rest, well, for Aegon. Supposedly the son of Rhaegar Targaryen and Elia Martell, the very same Elia whose brutal murder Oberyn Martell tries to avenge in season 4. In the show, we're told her children were slaughtered during Robert's Rebellion, but in the books, young Griff, aka Aegon Targaryen, the son of Rhaegar and Elia, was smuggled out and groomed to reclaim the throne. Now, and this is important, whether young Griff is actually Aegon or a carefully constructed imposter is still heavily debuted in the fandom, but that's not the key issue here. The key issue is this: by removing young Griff from the story, the show didn't just cut a character, it altered the trajectory of the entire political endgame, and that single decision made the book fans angry, because be aware the butterfly effect. Because in the books, Aegon VI isn't just some one-season character. In the books, he's invading Westeros, and Dorne is his main ally. Oberyn's death actually means something in the books, and it pisses them off and makes them join Aegon, which means cutting young Griff doesn't just weaken Dorne's storyline, it makes it almost completely pointless. By doing that, you also remove the Hightowers. Yeah, those Hightowers, that same ancient politically powerful house that plays a massive role in House of the Dragon, one of the wealthiest, most influential families in Westerosi history. Now go look for them in Game of Thrones. Go on now, look for them, and you'll see almost nothing. Yeah, nothing. They're practically absent, because their relevance is heavily tied to the political dominoes set up in the later books. Dominoes that never fall in the show because the pieces were removed. And this is where Martin's downfall truly begins, because while the showrunners were adapting season 1 through 5, they had the books, but by the time season 6 rolled around, they were running out of material. Martin's delay on the Winds of Winter forced a major decision, and that decision was to completely cut young Griff. And instead of the simplified endgame that we got, the books were building towards something far more politically unstable. The fandom was starting to fracture, because as season 6 aired in 2016, there was still no Winds of Winter. The promised 2014 release had come and gone, 2 years had passed, and book readers were getting restless. So restless that the pressure finally reached Martin himself. In July 2016, he made a public promise. He said he was not writing anything until he delivered the Winds of Winter. Anyhow, time goes by, season 7 premieres in July 2017, and it's another massive success. It breaks social media records, millions of tweets suddenly trending worldwide. Even today, even if you ask fans about season 7, many will still say it was good, or at least enjoyable, especially when compared to what comes next. But here's where things start getting complicated. Remember how Martin said in July 2016 that he wouldn't write anything until he finished the Winds of Winter? Well, fast forward to July 2017, and here we have Martin confirming he's releasing a new Westeros book, Fire and Blood, the very same book that House of the Dragon is based on, which means that instead of delivering Winds of Winter, he releases Fire and Blood in 2018, and by doing that, he broke his promise to the fans. Now, to be fair, and this is important, a lot of fans were frustrated, but people actually read Fire and Blood, and it was good, like genuinely good. It recontextualized the Targaryen dynasty in a completely new light, and I gotta say, characters like Aegon the Conqueror, King Jaehaerys, and Aegon II were total chads in these books. Take Aegon II for example. Dude had both legs physically broken, and yet he still drags himself forward to avenge the dragons on 2 broken legs, even when many of those dragons once belonged to his enemies. But the next 2 years just seemed to drift by with absolutely no progress on the Winds of Winter, and as the years ticked forward, the show also had to keep moving toward its conclusion, which meant that season 8 was delayed all the way to 2019, giving fans 2 full years to slowly realize that maybe, just maybe, the story they loved so much might not get the ending it deserved. Because the moment season 8 finally aired, comment sections on Reddit, YouTube, and Twitter erupted into complete chaos. Everyone was collectively losing their minds over choices that felt so out of character that it was almost hard to believe that this was the same show they had spent years loving. Like Daenerys burning the small folk in King's Landing for seemingly no reason. The reaction was so extreme that in fact it actually overshadowed the hate for the Rise of Skywalker, which, don't get me wrong, was insanely bad. And so after the show's catastrophic end, 2020 went by with no major updates. 2021 came and went by, and on March 2022, Martin went on to say how he was heavily involved in all of the Game of Thrones spin-off shows which have taken up a ton of his time. He went on to say that for many of you out there, only one of those projects matters, saying he's sorry and how they all matter to him. In October 2022, Martin went on an interview with Stephen Colbert and said this.
Legally, I have to ask you how things are going with Winds of Winter.
I think I'm about 3/4 of the way done.
Martin stated how he's about 3/4 of the way done with the book, essentially having written roughly 1,100 manuscript pages. And in 2023, Martin announced that he's co-producing another spin-off called A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms, which, by the way, is totally awesome. But it was in 2024 that he truly began losing a significant portion of his fan base. Readers had grown weary of missed deadlines and optimistic updates that led nowhere. Still, July 2024 marked a turning point. After visiting his Voyager editor in London, speculation exploded online. Fans convinced themselves that The Winds of Winter was finally complete and that a major announcement was imminent. Martin quickly shut that down, saying, "Last year when I mentioned seeing my Voyager editor in London, the internet went nuts, throwing up all sorts of theories about how this meant that Winds of Winter was done and a huge announcement was at hand. Sorry guys, but no." That single post reignited a firestorm. Social media filled with a now familiar refrain, "Winds of Winter is never coming out." As usual, Martin responded saying, "Maybe they are right, I don't know." For many fans, that was not reassuring. Then 2025 arrived with no major update on the book. At one point, Martin referred to Winds of Winter as the curse of his life.
That's the curse of my life here. There's no doubt. Winds of Winter is 13 years late.
By August 2025, the tension had boiled over. During a live Q&A, a fan bluntly confronted him, saying he might not be around for much longer, and asked how he felt about another writer finishing Winds if necessary. It was an uncomfortable moment, one that underscored the anxiety surrounding the unfinished books. Then in January 2026, A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms premiered to major success. The world of Westeros was thriving on screen once again, but the same question lingered: what about Winds? Martin then went on to reveal that he still had approximately 1,100 manuscript pages written, the same number he had cited back in 2022. 5 years had passed and the page count hadn't moved. Worse still, he confirmed that there was no contingency plan for another writer to complete the novel if something were to happen to him, stating plainly, "If that happens, my work won't be finished." For many readers, that was the most sobering moment of all.